We used to be in another place. It's in Drumcondra, at the top of Clondiv Road. There was an old building. Actually, I have pictures of it. There was an old building, and the Catholic Institute for Deaf People really kind of owned that building, and a lot of deaf people, now sorry, going back maybe 30 years ago, the deaf people used to meet in a pub in Rathmines, and Tuesdays and Fridays they used to play snooker, they played table tennis, and it was a really good place to go. Then this building opened in Drumcondra, I think in the early 1990s, and it was a big building, the Catholic Institute for the Deaf, but for some reason it didn't appeal to the deaf community. It was kind of seen as the old people go, you know, an old person's deaf club. And deaf people were kind of in and out. So the deaf community was very staggered. They didn't have a place really where they had to go and everybody would meet together. It was kind of like the old, seen as the old deaf club. And then different groups then kind of went to meet socially in one place, another group would meet. So it was very staggered all over. So when they were in Drumcondra, the relationship between the deaf community and the Catholic Institute for the Deaf was not good, because there were hearing people on the board. There was no connection, there was no communication, there was a lot of frustration, hearing people, you know, telling us what to do, what we should do, blah blah blah. So the relationship wasn't good. So then a priest recognised this and said, you know, we want to change that. So he recruited a CEO and said, look, you're going to have to start working with the deaf community. And during that time, the government wanted to build a train station through that building. And the government approached the Catholic Institute for the Deaf and said, look, we're willing to give you 12 million for your building if you let us build a train station. So they said, yeah, okay, we'll give whatever. So they met with the deaf community and said, okay, they called a big meeting and just said, we were given 12 million. What do you want us to do? Will we build another centre? What do you want to do? So the deaf people were saying, yeah. But they were very, they didn't really trust the Catholic Institute for the Deaf because the relationship wasn't good. So over a period of 4 years, they got the deaf community and said, look, what do ye want? So the deaf then started to recognise that the deaf community was staggered. So let's bring everybody into one centre. So this is when the organisations then, like we have 12 organisations here under DVI, and let it be a one-stop shop for all the services here, and then like people from all around Ireland could come here. So that was the plan. There was a lot of rows. It wasn't straightforward because this building initially, you see, the grounds are owned by the Catholic Institute for the Deaf. So the deaf community were saying, you know, yeah, well, but we want to have some control as well. So this place, this used to be this old boarding school for deaf boys. But in the past, there was a lot of abuse and a lot of hurt, a lot of whatever. So the deaf community then decided, okay, let's knock the school down. So they got a bulldozer in. And then another part of the deaf community was saying, yeah, but hold on, there's history in the school. We want to keep one part of the wing. You'll see it where you were with Tracy.
Yes.
That part they kept. So there was a lot of fighting and a lot of kind of divided the deaf community. Say, we want that knocked down. No, we want to save it. No, we want a museum. So anyway, the agreement was okay that they would keep part of the wing, but knock down the rest. So the politics was there was a lot of it wasn't easy. So anyway, really there was a lot of community set up. So we went abroad and tried to get ideas what we wanted in the deaf centre. So we went to Gallaudet in America, and there was a deaf, no, not a deaf, there was an architect who designed buildings for deaf people. So we got a lot of ideas from him. Like you'll see the atrium there where there's space for sign, there's no long corridors. You'll see over in the lift, it's all glass, it's visible, so that if anybody was stuck in the lift, they could sign. You see the gardens, all the tables are round, everybody is round, so nobody's left out in conversations. We always have round tables. You'll see the round tables here in the atrium. We have the day centre come in. So we kind of took all these ideas to make it a deaf-friendly space, and loads of light, brightness, so that, you know, it's not hard to see signs. So we kind of took all that into consideration. And then we were saying, okay, if we were building a centre, how are we going to survive? You know, so then the idea was then to build Inspire, which is a swimming pool and gym.
Yes.
And we would again use, the locals could use that for the memberships. We have 2,400. Remember, because you couldn't rely on the deaf, it would be, the numbers would be very small.
Yeah.
So that's where the income was supposed to happen. The profits that they make every year is supposed to go into the deaf centre to keep it surviving. We are 5 years here now. It hasn't happened because there was a lot of hiccups, but it is happening. So we are now in a transition. We're talking that we might actually, it's a separate company, that we might take over that. So that's where we're working towards now. When we moved in here in 2012, it wasn't easy, because with all different organisations, there was a lot of politics. That hearing and deaf was a huge big factor, because deaf people had serious issues and problems the way they'd been treated in the past by the Catholic Institute, so there was a trust issue. So I worked in the school, and they asked me then, would I come here for 3 months just to kind of tease out, get organisations working together. And then they asked me to stay for another year, and then another year, and I'm here since.
Yes.
But yeah, so the relationship, it was very difficult. Like when I came first, my job was to reassure people, getting them to working together, and there was like, there was a lot of politics. So I thought, how am I going to do this? So my secret was, I told them all, we're going to have coffee morning every Friday, homemade cakes. And it took 1.5 years for them, everyone, to come to that coffee break. Eventually it was first, having coffee break, and I was busy baking, brought in, and that really helped. It took 1.5 years, and people were saying, you know, what's all this about?
Yeah.
Put the politics behind you, and we moved on, and that really helped to get people together, to see, look, we're all on the same page. We all have to learn to trust each other. We're all here for the one thing, is to provide a service for deaf people, and we're all working together. So it really worked. So now we're one big happy family. So yes, it took time. So the organisations, like each organisation is unique. They provide a different, a special service for deaf people. So all of the organisations are very, very important. It's not just like, they're all equal and they're all treated equally, and they're all very, very important to have here. A lot of the organisations are voluntary, which is a worry because it's not state funded and it's always money is an issue. So we try to support them. We work well together in keeping them here. So we've survived so far 5 years. Let's hope we can keep it going, you know, and that's what we want, really. So that's really the history.
Yes.
If that's
It's really nice history. I really enjoyed that story. Right, okay. I'll see what
The first question is already.
yes, we already made. So outside of this village, are there many facilities for deaf people to go to enjoy things really outside of this village?
Well, outside of this village, there are small little deaf clubs. Like there's one in Limerick, there's one in Cork, whatever. But this would be the main place to come to if there was a big event here. And I remember actually in 2013, see, we had the 2 schools for the deaf on the grounds as well. Now they're amalgamated, but they weren't always amalgamated. They've only amalgamated in the last 2 years. But I'm partially deaf myself, and I went to boarding school, and in 2013 we organised all past pupils of St Mary's to come here for an event, and they came here at 8:30 in the morning and they left at 4:30 in the morning. And you know what, it was so emotional because there were people that wouldn't have seen each other 20 years, 30 years because they went to the schools.
Yes.
And it was just like really special because when you're in boarding school, like remember in those days we never went home. We only went home 3 times a year. We didn't go home every week. Like eventually that came. So you grew up with your peers, very strong bond, and then you leave school and you know people kind of drift and have their own lives and you don't see each other. So when you bring them all together, and we had about 400 at that, and the emotion, just, oh my God, remember you, la la la, and it was just brilliant.
Yes.
So we had a lot of those events. We had the St Mary's, then we had another where 7 deaf people swam the channel, and we had a big party here. So there was 500 people from all around came to this party to celebrate, and it was an all-day thing. So we have big functions like that that are very special. And so the village really has brought the deaf community together.
Yes.
If we didn't have the village, we wouldn't have kind of a strong community
Yes.
as such. And I suppose then the next one was like the ISL bill. I mean, that was just surreal as well. Like we had big celebrations here. Everybody came from Ireland, you know, all around came here to celebrate. So we have a lot of those events. So the village does bring people in from all around Ireland. Do you know that kind of way?
Yeah.
Now we have a lot of parties, events. There's always something that's going on, and the organisations organise that. And I think it brings the community and brings people together.
Yeah.
And there's a strong sense now of a great acceptance of hearing people and deaf people working together.
Yes.
You know, we got there, and that's good. You know. So
Yeah, that was what I was thinking when we were here yesterday. We were trying to communicate with 2 people who couldn't, who were deaf, and the communication, it didn't go as well as with hearing people because that's normal. But we could understand each other. It was very nice to work together to understand each other.
Right.
Really liked it. So we saw online that Irish Sign Language became an official language in Ireland.
Yeah.
So what was your reaction when all of that happened?
Well, the build up to it, we were kind of campaigning really hard and
Yeah.
going outside the government office and, you know, fighting, we want ISL. And we've been doing that for a while, and
Yeah.
then the day then we were all invited to go into Dáil Éireann,
Yeah.
and it's very unusual that they would invite a community to go into the Dáil Éireann. Usually you wouldn't be allowed.
No,
So we were told we would go, would be allowed, be in the chamber, but we were not allowed to make any noise or talk. So we went in, and to listen to the debate, it was just like, we were just so glued, and the emotions were like, oh no. Because at one stage it was like, you know, they were no, and we were like, oh no, you know, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? And then when they said, you know, that it's gone through, we couldn't help but scream, and the government like and said, this is unheard of, but I will allow it. And we were like, oh my God. We were all emotional, so it was fantastic. But even it showed it on live television that the government would, but he'll allow it, like everybody. It was just unheard of, because it was very, very, very emotional. And then we just partied all night.
Yeah, of course.
And we were just like, it was just unbelievable. Like, oh my God, like this day has come, because we thought you'd never see the day. You're always fighting, campaigning and saying we need it.
Yeah, of course.
And then when it comes, it's just like, it's just real. Like, you know?
Yeah, how long did it take to really get it?
Years and years. We've really, I'd say in a total of 30 years.
Wow.
But in the last, I say 5 years, we've come down real heavy and campaigning and because there wasn't an awareness, and they didn't really understand why, or you know, ISL would be really important to the deaf community. So when you start explaining about the isolation and, you know, that not having access and, you know, going into, then people became, oh right, I get it. Because deafness is a hidden disability.
Yes.
That people think, oh, not being able to hear it, that's the problem. No, it's not. It's other things. It's being isolated, not having access to information, or there's always barriers. That's the problem.
Yes.
You know? And I think there's an awareness now. And 2 years ago in Ireland, there was 2 brothers. And one brother was a carer for his other brother. And his other brother was very vulnerable. And anyway, it came into the news that the carer actually died in the house. And the brother couldn't ring the guards. He was so vulnerable.
Yeah.
He didn't know what to do.
No.
So sadly, he died a month later through starvation and through, because he couldn't look after himself. He depended on his brother. So that kind of, in the, like we actually had the funeral here, and that highlighted in Ireland, oh my God, that's terrible, and why? And there were, media gave an awful lot of coverage on that and said why, and they were isolated. So then people got it, said, right, okay. So they got it. If he had had access, if he had an interpreter, if he had gone to the Garda station, would they have understood him, you know? So people started asking questions. So then that really did help with the campaign for ISL.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean?
What changes did the government do?
Well, in the ISL bill, they're going to, like, I suppose there's an awful lot of changes. In one of the changes, if you go to court, like there was a few court cases where the courts would not provide an interpreter, and the people in the courts would not have a clue what's going on. They wouldn't allow interpreters. So that's changed. So they will now have interpreters in court. It's all about having access. What else is there? They're talking about voucher systems, giving vouchers to deaf people if they want to go to the doctor, if they want to go whatever, use public services, that there will always be an interpreter, and they're obliged by law now to have an interpreter, not to kind of have writing.
Yes.
I mean, that still goes on, but sometimes the communications, it's all given wrong because they didn't have access. So it's all about getting access. It's about the school children as well having access to SNA supports, sign language being used, because it wasn't seen as an important. Now it's seen that it's crucial in a child's life. What else is there? Is really having full access to our public services. That's what makes a huge difference.
So when deaf people travel, is there a big difference between sign languages in other countries, or is it like one universal language? And how do they communicate when they're traveling?
Okay. Yes, ISL would not be the same as the north
No.
of Ireland.
Yes.
It'd be totally different. Like if somebody came down from doing BSL, like English
Yes.
signs, I would not have a clue
No.
what they're saying. It's totally different.
Yeah.
And it's the same worldwide.
Yes.
But we would have similarities around the American Sign Language.
Yes.
So you would kind of get bits and you understand them. But there is an international sign language, but it is not, it's all gesture.
Yes.
It's more body
Yes.
moving. So if you're going and you're meeting deaf people around the world, it's really about gestures, body language, your facial expressions.
Yeah.
So that's how they communicate. But each country is proud of their own sign
Yes,
language. So like the Irish wouldn't be the same as the French,
No.
Spanish, totally different.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.